Now, when you have to hit your beats in that precise, where's the room for spontaneity and riffing?
I would tell people very plainly, feel free to do whatever you want. Just know if it's bad, you've ruined everything.
Yeah, we're going to fall for that. That's fucking epic.
And so I would leave it up to them.
Kind of crazy. I think you're the only person that I've ever met who's played Mike D.
I played Mike D.
You played Mike D.
The lady's choice.
Exactly. That's kind of a better, I mean, it's
There's not many people that, there's only one person who could say they played Mike D.
Exactly. Aside from Mike D.
Exactly. No, I sure did.
It's kind of a unique thing to be put into a situation where you get to kind of play that role of a band that I'm sure changed your life like they changed my life. I mean, it's kind of a great call to get, right?
Oh my God. It was like one of the greatest things that ever happened to me. And me and Danny McBride and Elijah Wood, who got to be the Beastie Boys in the video, and Jack Black and Will Ferrell and John C. Reilly, who are the older versions. Yeah. It was like, but we were we shot that video for like 3 days, and it was like the greatest 3 days of our lives. We were just the whole time could not believe what we were doing and that we got to do it and that we were like rapping into the fisheye lens.
Getting to live out that dream that as kids we all wanted to be.
All you want to do is rap into the fisheye lens. I know. Walking down the street. That's all as a little Jewish kid who loves rap. That's the pinnacle. That's the height of all you could hope for.
It's nice to finally meet you, man. And and congrats on everything. And I mean that. I mean, what an amazing life you've been able to build for yourself and a journey through what you love, starting out with comedy and then now getting to sort of touch all of these different aspects of the process, right down to creating this show, which is such an incredible watch, The Studio, dude.
Thank you. What a lovely way to start this.
It must be really nice to see the way this is rolling out because you put so much love into it. You know you've got something on set. You know you've got something in the edit bay, but you cannot guarantee how people are going to take it, right?
Yeah, for sure. I'm always very nervous when releasing a thing, and especially like the more involved I am in it, the more invested I am in it, and the more nervous I get leading up to its like release into the world. And I used to say it's like giving birth in a way, and that is like it's ultimately a painful experience, and you hopefully something great comes out of it. But the act itself of putting it out at times can be very painful, and I think I've gotten much better with it, and I hope I've put more focus on the process and try to extract more joy out of like my day-to-day experience making the things I'm making rather than solely focusing on its like reception as the thing that is my barometer for whether or not I should be happy or not.
Yeah, because when you're younger and you get this opportunity, I'm sure there's so much, to your point, wrapped up in what you're doing and how it's perceived and everything else. The joy is probably quite low on the ladder of experiences at times.
Yeah. I mean, when I first started, honestly, I look back and like I've had a very lucky career in many ways in that, the first things I did were very good. So and it's like I look back and I was lucky enough that like my first job I was on like one of the best TV shows of all time, which is like not. And at the time, when you're young, you're just like, oh yeah, like you get it a thing and it's great. Yeah. And it's like, and it's amazing and everyone loves it, but then it gets canceled. And so you're like, okay, it's like a good lesson, but I think in a way it gave me like a good chip on my shoulder where it's like, we do great work and like, maybe it's not always appreciated. And then we started making movies. And we had like a completely unprecedented run of hits that, again, I look back at the time, I like completely took it for granted. And I just thought like, yeah, you make a good movie, it comes out and it's a huge success. Yeah. That's just what happened. Yeah. And then over like the following decade of my life, I think is when I really learned like, oh, that's not what happens every time. And you can make something you're very proud of and just people don't respond to it or like those are like the 3 boxes you're trying to tick, I guess, in some ways. It's like, do you like it? Is it like viewed as good? And is it successful?
Do you like it though is the most important one, isn't it? I mean, that's the thing. I think I've spoken to a lot of musicians in my life and actually had a chance to spend some time with Brian Eno, who's like music Yoda.
Oh, yeah.
He's like art Yoda.
He designs nice things as well.
Great light boxes.
Yeah, light boxes. His stages are lovely.
Going into his studio is like, oh, this is kind of how, I guess this is a great way to age into the next lifetime. Yeah. Just create all the time. And he was just saying like, the first question you have to ask yourself is, what do I like?
Yeah.
Like, what do I want to see? Which I think sometimes in the arts, people get a little bit nervous about acknowledging that. It's like, well, hang on, man, is that a little self-indulgent? But it's kind of step number one, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. And I think like the dance between like self-indulgence and like just like creatively doing something you're excited about is like a very fine line. And I think we've made things that are incredibly self-indulgent, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing if it also is resonating with the audience. You know what I mean? And I think the word indulgence is, but maybe like, I think it could be self-reflective and very, and you are your audience, I think, in a lot of ways. So I'm also always like making like whatever it is I would want to watch.
In a singularity like that, where you're focused on storytelling, like in this, like, and also you cover a lot of interesting tales and stories and scenarios on the studio, but it is done in this very sort of linear. Here are the characters, almost like a play at times, which I really love. And I love the fact that it moves like a play, it's paced like a play. Yeah. It's almost like you've got the orchestra in the pit playing the entire time. The whole thing feels very theatrical in a lot of ways.
It's funny because it's a thing not a lot of people notice about the show, but to me was almost one of the most like the thing that I thought made it feel different than a lot of things on television is there's only one storyline per episode.
That's right.
And pretty much all shows have several storylines you're cutting between, and you're serving these kind of arcs that go throughout the season often. So it's like, and even comedically, like Seinfeld is a huge inspiration to me. But they did a thing where they would have like 3 storylines and they would kind of converge in the end, come into one storyline.
Like things that happen in episode 2 was sometimes
they would come all the way back. And so we thought, like, what if there's one thing you're following and you're not cutting between these things? And it's more like a movie in my head, because I think when you write movies, to me, it is more like that usually. You're sometimes cutting between things, but they're often more singularly focused. And so it does give it this drive that is a little more like a play, because plays often don't cut between a lot of different storylines and they kind of have one singular drive and one singular focus that hopefully is like propulsive from scene to scene. But yeah, a lot of plays don't have like an A story and a B story and a C story.
Very expensive to do that.
It would be a lot. It's a lot of sets.
Now if we could just go over to this theater, we'll conduct the other story.
Exactly.
Hang on, wait, where am I going? No, it's incredible, dude. And from the very beginning, when it begins, it's very clear that you're going to walk this line between comedy and anxiety, which is often where some of the best comedy exists. Yeah. This idea of like, oh man, the uncomfortability, you got to sit in it to get the laugh. And, that's a really fine line to walk though, right? And great comedies have done that. And I wonder sort of like what the process was between trying to build out these characters that are ultimately, there's a punchline in here waiting to be told, but the process to get to that is at times like you got your head in your hands like, oh my God, Matt, shut the fuck up.
Yeah, it's, we like that it's like an inherently, I think it's reflective of my life, which I generally feel is uncomfortable and is excruciating at times from a social standpoint. I'm constantly interacting with people where I don't know what to say, or I feel like I've said the wrong thing, or
you speak for all of us.
I'm constantly in situations where there's so much more pressure on me to do or say the right thing than I would have ever wanted there to be at any moment in my life.
Friends, looking at really good friends of ours, have an amazing conversation with strangers, and 3 of us are like, look at this fucking guy. How does he do it?
What are they saying?
How does he do it?
What are all these people saying?
Look at his body language. My God, I'm uncomfortable with my best friends watching him.
I know. I totally agree. I marvel at other people's ability to just speak to one another in a comfortable way. I do. I'll look at a party and I'm like, what are they talking about? So I think that is reflective of my own awkwardness navigating Hollywood, you know what I mean? And we really, to us, a funny thing is like stakes. Like we like there to be like intense stakes to that build throughout things. And me and Evan always talk about like, I think a lot of story structures are like an arc, which they teach you, but we like ours to be like a ramp, sort of like something that really starts low and then shoots
it's
up.
spiraling off into outer space at times.
Exactly. And that to us has always been like a structure that we understand and sort of like to pursue, is like it just keeps upping and upping and upping and upping and upping, And so
I'm just thinking of like the most recent episode, for those people who haven't seen it, too bad, the missing reel, man, when it ramps up to you actually physically rugby tackling Olivia Wilde down a fucking hill, which by the way, an epic role that lasts about about 10 seconds.
It's a very long hill roll.
During which time you think like someone's getting seriously injured until Olivia Wilde says, "Fuck you, man, you piece of shit."
Fuck you. No, it just keeps going. And that's not even where it gets bigger from there.
So let's talk about the pitch. Let's break it down and get a bit modular about it, right? Because I've got a chance to talk to you about process because the studio is all about process.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about process, right? And the idea of pitching a movie like Pineapple Express or these films when you go in there and you're laughing as you say it, but equally you've got to convince people to invest real money in these things. And to some degree, it's like, what is the pitch really? Like people want to know, what is it like to go pitch a film like that?
Well, we did for our first few movies, we did not pitch them. We just wrote them.
Yeah.
We wrote them on spec, they call it, which is on speculation or a speculative screenplay. And that's when you just write it and then try to sell the finished product. And so, I mean, with Superbad, we were young when we started writing it. And so we didn't know there was a thing called pitching or anything like that. We wanted to write a movie, and so we wrote a movie. And then by the time we wrote Pineapple Express, it was a similar thing where we just saw it was such a we would tell our friends even the idea, and we would get this look where they were just like, that's not a good idea. And we would be like, oh, it's like a weed action comedy. It's sort of like in that like 48 Hours, like Beverly Hills Cop vibe, but it's like two stoners. And what you picture is the stupidest movie of all time. And we were like, no, but it's like, we want it to be good, and we want it to like have real heart and real emotion. We want the action to kind of be like well executed and there to be real stakes and
But even as you're saying this to your friends, if you had to say this to a studio executive and you hadn't written speculatively,
yes,
you're failing immediately.
Fully. And that we saw that in real time. We're like, we just need to write this movie. And then by the time we got to This Is the End, no, I actually even think we wrote This Is the End on spec. Like Neighbors is like, we pitched Neighbors because Neighbors was like so easy to wrap your head around. It was like, we had Zac Efron there, and it was like, me and Zac Efron are neighbors. I'm a dad with a new baby. He's the head of a frat. We live next to each other, and we go to war with each other. And that was basically,
and that's what you have to say.
And we pitched it out. You need to, the big thing in a pitch is you're basically pitching like the set comedy pieces that bring the story you're telling to life.
Giving a bit of color to it.
If the promise is me and Zac Efron are going to war and we're living with each other, then I think the things we had going into it were like, we try to be friends at first, and so we get fucked up and we do shrooms and stuff like that, and then we realize it's not going to work, and so we start, I start calling the cops on him, and he realizes I'm calling the cops on him, so they start getting revenge on us. And I think we had this idea that our baby finds a condom in the yard. I think that was a part of the pitch.
That's in the pitch.
That's in the pitch. That feels like a joke that's in the pitch.
We got to give them the worst and the easiest, right? Start with the easiest, but then we got to see what their appetite is for this.
You got to see what they want.
So if they're down with the baby and the condom in the yard, I think we're off to the races.
Oh, they know. Everyone knows. A studio's like, baby in the condom, that's Buddy in the Pig. Yeah. That was a much more easy to pitch thing. And it's different, like there's no correlation also between like how easy a thing is to, like we went out with the show The Boys, and like no one wanted it at first. Like it was like so hard to sell.
Do people give you honest feedback when they reject things, or is that
no, never. Ever. It's exactly like as much as you believe my character would be honest to someone about why they didn't like something. That's exactly as it is.
It's placeholder kindness, right? It's just like, hey man, we'll get back to you.
It's very calculated. It's like, how do I say a thing that won't make me look like an asshole? And maybe if this person does something I like, I can kind of make my way back in there, but I don't like it's all very calculated.
But you walk away with Evan or whatever, or your friends, and you go, that ain't it.
Oh yeah, we'll know. They will often. Sausage Party was the funniest one. Like we actually pitched Sausage Party and we made.
It will go down as your piece de resistance, by the way.
Exactly. And what's funny is we were so confident in it that we almost wore hot dog outfits to the pitch. Evan was like, we got to. And I was like, no, like we can't do it. And thank God we did it, because the first round of pitches, we pitched to every studio and no one bought it. And I just remember like being in the parking lot, like walking from the offices of Paramount, like to our car, and getting the phone call from our agents being like, nope, they're not doing it.
Within a minute.
Yes. And I just remember turning to Evan and being like, as much as this sucks, thank God we're not dressed as hot dogs right now. The only thing that could make his
everyone would be on the 6th floor watching you like in that scene in Fargo.
Looking at our
Fargo,
phone.
walking across your massive car park, just filming you in hot dogs.
Like, phones,
look at these putzes.
They're getting the call right now. They're shaking their heads. Yeah.
They're like this. Hey, guys, listen, we'll give us some thought. You walk out, there's no fucking way.
Literally. That's exactly what it is. Let us think about it. No, call their agents.
I'm obsessed with straight-face comedy. And I think, and you're someone, like you said, who's analyzed comedy and all these different elements of comedy. And let's talk about Zac Efron as somebody in the 4th episode and also in the other areas you've done. He is a great straight-faced comedian. He almost plays it like a drama.
Oh, yes.
But it makes it funnier. His ability to makes it funnier. Rose Byrne, the same thing. We've seen her in incredible dramatic roles. And Matt Damon is another one who can hold down a very dramatic role and then show up and almost not really put a comedy spin on thing, but somehow you find him fucking hilarious.
Yes.
So what is the trick behind that? What is the trick behind straight-faced comedy? How do you get let's put it into casting.
Yeah.
How do you know that someone's going to be able to pull that off? I never would have thought Zac Efron was a comedy hero until I saw Neighbors.
Yeah, I think sometimes you just meet someone in real life or you see them in enough things, and this has happened to me, and you're just, as a writer or director, you're just like, I know how to make that person funny. Yeah. Like, I understand what that person does, and I can use it. And it's usually because they are funny. I worked with many dramatic actors who I would never put in a comedy. Yeah. And some great dramatic actors, some of the best in the world, I would not put in a comedy. Like, I think just because you're a good actor, maybe I would in a small role. And I like to find people in 3 categories, which is like people who kill comedy, people who can do comedy, and people who can create comedy. And I mean that in like a performance level. Like, there are people who just, you can give them something funny and they'll make it not funny. Yeah. There are people who you give them something funny and they'll make it exactly as funny as you hoped it would be. Yeah. And there's people who you can give them something funny and they'll find a way to make it even funnier than you ever thought it could be.
And is that third category almost people who don't quite realize they're funny?
No, I think the third category is almost explicitly reserved for people who have an incredible mastery of what it is that they're doing. Right. And most of the other people fall into the second category, which is people. And I think Zach and Rose, though, fall into the third category because they're genuinely hilarious. Yeah. And they would always do things that, were plussing the stakes of the comedy. They would improvise things that and that was the thing with Zach, is I almost think I saw him really I don't want to say learn how to do it, but develop the muscle, the one muscle that in his body. But
it isn't developed.
Yes, exactly. And it was pretty developed going into Neighbors, but I think by the time we were done, the second one especially, he was firing on all comedic cylinders, and he fully understood. He's just so smart, how to improvise exactly what was actually additive to the scene and the story and the plot.
That scene when he's sitting in the living room in the dark having run, when he's running, and he comes back and he's like, I ran 25, it was a long way. I didn't have any shoes on. That scene is that's when I was like, funny. Oh shit, he's arrived for me as one of the great comedic actors.
And he knows how to use his intensity to comedic effect. And I think there are people who are just intense, and good directors and writers know how to apply that intensity, but I don't think the actor always understands what it is that is funny about it, but they do. I'd say Zach and Rose and they actually fully understand what it is that they're doing.
So as a fan of comedy, and this is to put you on the spot, if you ask me what's your favorite song right now, I'd end up in the fetal position and cry.
Exactly.
For an hour because lists are not my friend. But I'm trying to buy some time and have a think about it because let's talk about a Tom Cruise in Tropic Thunder, right? That moment when he showed up on screen and all of a sudden you're like, holy shit, Les Grossman is that is Tom Cruise showing a side of his ability as an actor, which I never expected, in full prosthetics, funny as fuck, totally unhinged, and completely nailed. And everybody nailed that film.
Yes.
And so, for you as a fan of comedy, have there been moments when you've been watching things on your sofa at home or whatever, and someone's shown up in a film, and you, just as a viewer, gone, holy shit, that you've really blown me away. I didn't expect you to be funny.
I mean, honestly, Robert De Niro. Yeah. I remember Meet the Parents came out when I was when we were doing Freaks and Geeks, I feel like. Yeah. And I was a huge Ben Stiller fan. And I remember seeing him and being like, oh my God, he actually is as funny as anybody,
Yeah.
and totally gets it. Like gets how to use his persona to like
the intensity of De Niro,
perfect comedic effect. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then he started just doing comedies basically for many years. You know,
even someone like John Cena, man. I see him as a wrestler. I know it's all theatrical and everything else, but dude, the guy's got great comic timing.
Him in Trainwreck, and we put him in Blockers after that. But like, I think seeing him in Trainwreck, I was like, oh, he's legitimately funny. Like, he's so funny. And that he's in that Ricky Stenicki movie with Zac Efron, and he's so fucking funny in that movie. It's insane how funny he is in that movie. So yeah, Cena's for sure one that like I knew he was good, but I didn't know he had like a true mastery of comedy to the degree that he does.
I think you summed it up beautifully when you said people who can use the intensity to which they're known in a way to make you laugh as well, to cross the floor and do that. I mean, in a lot of ways, the way that you've built out your sort of career in comedy has been to embrace, as you said before, some of those awkward things that we all experience as human beings, those kind of inadequacies that we feel in ourselves, others may not recognize, but you amplify them and you make them funny.
Yeah.
I try. It's incredible, man. In the same way that artists take a lot of pain sometimes in internal turmoil and turn it into music artists, and they learn something about themselves, and we get the benefit of watching it, not feeling quite so alone. Great comedians do the same thing.
Yeah.
Right. But you had to have learned something about yourself as you've done that, right? How has it helped your life going through these various situations, either on stage in stand-up comedy situations or writing them in script or acting them out? Has it been beneficial to you and not just us?
Yeah, I think it's made me, I think just acknowledging your own, kind of neuroses and the things that frustrate you and, get you, the things that like keep you up at night. Like, like for me, I think just acknowledging them and working them into your work for me, just sort of like, it's not even like a conscious process. I feel like it like naturally helps you address them in some
It's your
way,
internal dialogue.
What I mean? Yeah. And like when we were making Superbad, like I think like thank God by the time we made it, we were like, people who had found ways to have meaningful relationships with women. But at the time we were writing it, it was like deeply personal about how like I was a virgin for most of the time I was writing that movie. And I was at that age where I was like, is it ever going to happen? Am I defective? Am I someone that is unlovable? Am my friends the only people that I'll ever have deep relationships with? And even they are going to go their own separate ways at some point. And so it really was, and I think just also like when you make a movie about something, it makes it that you do stuff like this where you have to talk about it all the time, which I think also makes it kind of demystifies it. So like when we were in our teens, we wrote Superbad. And then we were in our 20s, we wrote Pineapple Express, which was really largely about like how the early part of our 20s, we were unemployed and just sat around and smoked weed all day and did nothing except kind of gripe about why weren't we more successful? Why weren't we the people whose movies were getting made? And why are we kind of such losers and everyone else is getting to do the shit they want to do? And we kind of took that frustration and kind of put it into these characters who kind of, are sort of losers and not, their lives aren't what they want them to be, and they sort of like haven't done any like introspection as to see why maybe that is, you know what I mean? And then in our 30s we made This Is the End, which was about like kind of fame and about successful people and about whether or not we were good people or not, and whether or not the friends
mostly no.
Yes, exactly. Whether or not our priorities were in order. And,
again, mostly no.
Exactly. And so we've always tried to do it for whatever like decade we're in our lives, I think. And that's how like the pitch for the studio started. Like actually it was us explaining like, we made Superbad in our teens, Pineapple Express in our 20s, This Is the End in our 30s. Now we're in our 40s, and this feels like it could be like our definitive expression of this era of our lives. And it really is about how I now run like a one of the people who run like a pretty big production company. I think we have 6 or 7 TV shows on the air right now. We make several theatrical films a year. You know, I work with my friends a lot. I am their boss often. I work with people I've looked up to my whole life. I don't want to disappoint them. I don't want to have bad dynamics with the people I care about that I'm also working with. Yeah. I don't want to make the things I'm working on worse. I want to make them better. I don't want to let the company down because 15 people work at it, and I don't want it to collapse. And I also don't want to walk down the street and feel like I'm making garbage that I'm not proud of.
You're describing an emotional drama, and somehow you've taken it and turned it into a smash hit comedy.
Well, to me, and again, like what we talked a lot about was actually like, how do you give the character an inherently funny conundrum?
Right.
That's what we realized for the character could be a conflict that inherently will always lead to comedy, is that he genuinely loves movies, but actually is in a position where he has to serve commerce or he will lose his job.
Yeah, and he also wants to be desperately wants to be a serious auteur.
Yes.
But ultimately, you can't be an auteur and want to be liked at the same time.
No, exactly. And he wants to be liked by the exact people who he has to disappoint constantly, which again is a comedic idea. Yeah. And that to us, like giving the character actual like building blocks that we could describe as comedic building blocks was something we talked a lot about, because that's not always how these things are. Even with my own writing, that's not always how we approach something.
You know, I had Marty Scorsese in here, literally sitting there at one point, and it was
scary, right?
Yeah, it really is. It took me 10 minutes to calm down and actually have the courage to ask a question that wasn't just a compliment. You know, he's like 10 minutes in, he's like, "You going to ask me something, or are you just going to tell me how great Raging Bull is?" But you get to obviously in episode 1, for those people who are getting ready to watch this, you know, he makes an incredible appearance playing himself and really ultimately plays scary Martin Scorsese as well as insecure Martin Scorsese.
And sad Martin Scorsese.
I mean, the cry at the end. How important was him saying yes to the ultimate rollout of other people saying yes?
It was very helpful. Like we shot that very early on in the show, and it was and it's the first episode, you know, and so and we pretty much shot the show in order basically.
And you hadn't worked with him, correct?
I literally shook his hand once for 2 seconds.
Holy shit. This is you and Evan sitting around in your living room writing this going, wouldn't it be great?
Yes, exactly. And it was a very like, we started, you know, it needed to be someone who my character would like be dying to work with, they would bend over backwards to work with, and someone who you believed would make a Jonestown movie, big, huge, and someone who you believed would make an incredibly expensive Jonestown movie, who would want $200+ million to make their Jonestown movie, and someone who, you know, I think it's because of Larry Sanders. Like we always just love this idea, and This Is the End was like a really fun exercise in it of like, we like it when our work really exists in the same world that the audience lives in. Yeah. Even if we're adding to that world or modifying a little bit, even if we're doing that, it's almost even more important in some ways to really create like the touchstones that the viewer has for the things we're talking about.
Shandling was like, I mean, we're of the generation to remember when we watched that for the first time. Shandling was one of the most groundbreaking creatives ever.
It was amazing. And that show was like huge to me and Evan, and we were obsessed with it. And it really like was the first thing where you were like, this feels real. Like these are the people who are on these talk shows. I watched them. I was obsessed with them. And I'm seeing, it was the most famous people of their time, you know, and it made it that there was like no suspension and disbelief when it came to that part of the show. You know what I mean? And there's some suspension and disbelief because you're like, oh, we're saying he's a talk show host in a network that doesn't exist, and they were doing the exact same thing as us, which we talked about, which there was like Letterman and Leno and Larry Sanders.
But we'd already had this experience with Gary as the Gary Shandling show.
Exactly.
So it was like the transition to Larry Sanders, we took a little bit of that with us.
For sure.
So it was like, oh yeah, he's playing a character, but it's still kind of Gary
it's
talking
still
to the
kind of Gary Shandling, and the names are very similar. And so that to us was very important. And it was the same with This Is the End, where we were like, okay, like, you know, I always have a hard time gauging exactly how famous me and my friends are, but we were like, it feels like if we were having a big Hollywood party that seemed aspirational, you would occupy it with this type of person. And so it was very important to get those actual types of people because we didn't want to seem fake in that way. And so for the show, again, that was hugely important. And so we basically, like, we were just like, it has to be Martin Scorsese. We were like, I mean, there's maybe like 2 or 3 other people on the planet that it could be potentially that kind of tick those boxes, but no one as much as him. Like he's the living, you know, greatest, you know, he is cinema. He's exactly who you would want.
He's in the rarest of air.
Yes, he's exactly who, especially if you were like a cinephile, who you would want to work with.
Yeah, it's like McCartney.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like Scorsese.
Yeah.
It's like there is a small group of people.
It's like Steven Spielberg and Martin Scorsese are like the two guys who, if you were my character, and Spielberg, you don't quite would maybe do like a really violent R-rated Jonestown massacre movie in the same way you buy Scorsese would do that movie.
The trick is that he's saying this and you're kind of interested in seeing it.
Oh yeah, it's a good movie. Yes. I mean, we worked honestly really hard on the fake movies on the show. And just like we actually referenced, I really like The Bear, and something we referenced was like, I don't work in the food industry, but I go to a lot of nice restaurants, and I project that the food they're serving on that show is representative of what the food you would actually be getting. And they've done a good job convincing me, whether it's true or not, that they have put exactly as much care and attention into the food as an actual chef would. And we
chef's
were
table element is really important to
exactly. And we were like, the movies in the show have to feel the same. Like we can't do like the stupid version of the movie. Like if you're hearing the pitch for a movie, it has to be exactly as good as what you would assume is getting pitched in these rooms. And if it's an idea that we get excited about, you have to believe it's actually an idea that we would be excited about.
I'm just thinking of the motel scene. No, I'm just thinking of the motel scene, and it's just like this. Just watching the whole thing fall apart in the screening room is just one of the funniest things. It's like you are like, well, actually, this is pretty arty. Where's this going? And then by the end of it, it's just like, oh my God.
Oh, no, it's bad.
There's so many reflections.
And like, we worked so hard on Alphabet City. Like, that's a movie I actually think we can make. Like, that's a cool, because we were also like, you're seeing it's such a good opening. It's such a good opening to a movie. We were like, what is the best opening to a movie you could actually have? He comes in, he's amazing, and it's just like, you get the whole story as well. Like, you fully get the entire, those were funny. The fake movies were really fun to shoot because often we worked them out like 80%, but we didn't always have every answer to every question. And like there were times where like Dave Franco and Anthony Mackie would come to us and we'd be like, we just need it to be a little more emotional.
You're
like,
directing a movie for a TV show.
And Dave would be like, what are we talking about? And we're like, honestly, I'm not 100% sure. I just know it needs to be more emotional.
And he's like, you want me to act more emotional in a fake movie for your TV show about fake Hollywood?
Everyone got into it. Everyone like really wanted to sell it. But yeah, we got, to answer your question finally, like, yes, we got Scorsese very early on. And from that point on, telling people, these are the types of people who are in this. We had Sarah Polley very early on. That was very exciting. Catherine O'Hara, honestly, is a huge draw to people. Like having her be a part of the show, honestly, people were really excited to work with her. Like I couldn't believe we got her on the show. Like she's one of my idols. Like I truly think she's one of the funniest living humans. And
hands
so
down. And decades of humor.
Yes, exactly. And like I think that's why she was so impactful to the cast, is like she's made movies since I was a kid, and so like almost everyone, and she's in After Hours. Like it's like almost everyone has like a movie of hers that they absolutely are obsessed with. You know what I mean?
She's so good at that kind of like dismissive, like I don't fucking think so. Look.
She's so funny. And so I'd say like Scorsese and O'Hara were actually the people that really, I think, made a lot of the cameos sign on to the show. And I think also because we had made this at the end, we had something we could point to where we were like,
we can do this.
We can do this. Like we've had people trust us with both representing kind of an accurate version of how you would think they are and like a totally off the fucking wall, like Michael Cera version of how we portray them that could not be more different. And people were generally So people are generally pretty excited to do it, honestly. Yeah.
You know, people are obsessed with Michael Cera, right?
Oh, he's the best.
The internet are completely fucking obsessed with Michael Cera.
They should be.
He could disappear
he's
for
amazing.
15 years and everyone's still going to be like, every birthday, people are going to celebrate
I
him.
hope
Like
so.
he's
He deserves it. I was just watching Top Chef Canada and he was in it. He popped up. I got so excited.
Why do you think that Michael Cera, and this you may not be able to answer this, but just because we brought him up and I'm as obsessed as anybody else, how do you think his mind works in terms of what he chooses to do and not do? Because he's so loved and yet he chooses so carefully. He doesn't show up in a lot of shit.
I don't know. He said yes to stuff that we've done that I'm shocked.
Yeah.
Like, he's currently on our Sausage Party TV show on Amazon. He's so funny in it. But then he kind of recedes. I don't know. I honestly think
he's definitely unique in his selection process. Like, and it's noticeable, I think, in a cool way.
I think he truly does stuff that he thinks is funny and that he would be excited to watch and to ingest. And I think he does things that like speak to his taste or stuff that he just thinks is fun to do. But honestly, I'm grateful he's been a part of anything I've ever done because like I truly think he's one of the funniest people ever. Yeah.
Let's talk about the commitment that you make in the studio that people may or may not recognize first time around. Episode 3, the oneer is a oneer.
Yes.
And it's a legit oneer.
It is not a legit one. I mean, because it is 4 things broken up. Because it's not only a oneer, it's shot at magic hour.
Yeah.
And so it was, and because there's so many logistical things happening, it had to be broken up into essentially
No, it would
4
have been
chunks.
a miracle to pull that shit off. I mean, it
would have been impossible. We actually saw like Adolescence does it, and I think with comedy, it's impossible to nail every one of these.
Of course, Adolescence is amazing, but there's moments where they're like literally shuffling papers for 30 seconds, and it adds to the drama and the pace of it. It's a remarkable show, but you can't do that when the jazz band's playing behind you.
No, exactly. We have a hyper dynamic style, and the timing of comedy is like so important, and so if something was off even, so for that episode, for example, it's like it starts in a car, we go, just resetting that car took 15 or 20 minutes. It's only, the whole thing is shot between like 5:30 and 6:30, basically. That was like the only window of time that we could actually film for the light properly. So we would have only been able to do like 2 takes or something like that if we had tried to do it all as one continuous thing because of how long it is and how long the reset is.
Which is very much part of the narrative of the entire episode.
Exactly. So what we did was we basically broke it up into 4 10-chunk things and would shoot 10 pages during magic hour in one shot a day, and then there was like 4 like key stitches.
It's still
basically
a huge undertaking. I mean,
it's unbelievably hard.
It's unbelievably hard. So let's talk about the pressure you're under as an actor, not just as a director and a writer and a creator, but as an actor to know that, it's different when you realize that if you make a mistake or you're not comfortable with your performance, you can have a much harder time convincing everybody to go again.
Yeah. I mean, and we do it through, and every scene of the whole show is a wonder. So that episode was hard, but honestly, there are shots and scenes in other episodes that were even harder than the chunks, than the 10-minute chunks in that episode. Yeah. But it really was, it was so fun, honestly. Like it was an idea that came up very early on, which was like, what if we do every scene in one shot? We were writing the oneer episode and we were like, this is going to be the best episode. And I think because of the style, it's going to really add to the whole tone and comedy of the show. And we were like, well, the whole show does have like this kind of tone and comedy. Yeah. So we were like, oh, maybe this is telling us we should try to do as much of it like this as we humanly can and only cut if we're changing locations or there's a time jump or
and this
something
is during
like
the writing of that episode. So you haven't cast everybody at this point.
Nope.
So that must change the casting process because all of a sudden you're not just thinking about who's going to play each role really well, but who's going to actually have the chops to be able to keep up with that.
Fully. And honestly, like that is why assembling like the core team of me, Ike, Chase, Catherine Hahn, and Catherine O'Hara was like I really viewed it like making like putting a like a jazz orchestra together.
Getting a band together.
There is a very prescriptive element to it, and also a very free element to it, but also like the timing.
Yeah.
It was an exercise in timing more than anything, because timing is the thing you manipulate most editorially. Is you take air out of things, you add air to things.
That's where the comedy nuance is, right?
That's where a lot of comedy directors will tell you really find the comedy is in editing. And we were like, what if we took that away from ourselves? But again, to serve the style. And we knew that would be the biggest thing we were losing by shooting this way, was the opportunity to comedically tweak things in editorial. And so we were like, we need people who can just do it, who understand rhythm and timing enough and are flexible enough to change in the moment, but also technically proficient enough to nail these incredibly precise rhythms.
I was going to ask you about improv in the moment, right? About riffing, because because at the end of the day, right, when you've got multiple takes, we've all seen the outtakes of Judd's films, of Adam's films, of your films, and when everyone's like, okay, at the very end, the credits roll, and here's Will and John, and it's like, hey man, get the Jackknife Hawk 3000, and you're laughing at the outtakes, right? And you realize, oh shit, this is how they get their best jokes. You just go and go and go and go. Now, when you have to hit your beats in that precise, where's the room for spontaneity and riffing?
I would tell people very plainly, feel free to do whatever you want. Just know if it's bad, you've ruined everything.
Yeah, we're going to fall for that. That's fucking epic. Oh my God. Calm down, Matt. Calm down, Matt. That's
so I would leave it up to them. And I knew these people are a good gauge, Jen. Because also when you're improving, like
you're James Brown. You're like, you can rip if you want, but if it sucks, I'm charging you $100 for your mistake.
I mean, I would think about that James Brown movie a lot, where he was like, what instrument do you play? The saxophone. He's like, no, you play the drums. And that honestly, that really stuck with me. And it was a very similar thing, where it was like, your job, more importantly than to say the right words, is to keep the right rhythm. And so as long as the timing wasn't affected and was tight still, I would say, I don't want it to be rigid. If you think of a funny joke, please, but the stakes are
very, very high. Very high.
And the first few takes, they're less high than the later takes, because inherently a million other things are going to go wrong the first few takes. The camera's pointing at the wrong place. The cues are not exactly worked out. This person's entering a second later than they should, all this kind of shit. And so we would, there is
that
also
when people are riffing then? Because it's like, you know what? Everyone's on their game right now, and someone else is going to make an error, so maybe I try some shit.
Maybe I'll try some stuff, and we do that again. But people would still, and I think that's what's great about these people, is they're almost incapable of not trying an idea that they genuinely think is good.
So it's a mentality you're looking for to some degree. We know Ike has that. We know Catherine has that. I didn't realize Chase Sweet Wonders had that.
She was encouraged. She's so funny, and she is a really writer, and she wrote for Harvard Lampoon. She's someone, and that's part of the reason we hired her. Is what's funny is the cameo she was most excited about was Nick Stoller. She was because he also wrote for the Harvard Lampoon, and she was like, Nick Stoller's on the show. Oh my God, it was so funny, and there would be times where we would be like, let's just do the same thing again this take, but people still wouldn't. People would still they are literally incapable of not.
Who's
trying
most incapable? Is Ike?
Catherine Hahn is
I
by far the most incapable.
I was going to say, because she is without a doubt, she's off the scale on this show.
Yeah, and her scenes are crackling with life in a way that feels unwritten. It feels unwieldy.
Well, she's such a confused human. I mean, if I met that person in the street, I'd be like, man, I cannot figure you out.
Yes, exactly. Right? And I think that is
you're like bad 90s hip hop.
Yes.
Mixed with super powerful,
super hype beast, and also incredibly powerful. There's a desperation to it, but also a confidence to it. What we would see is very early on, actually, is with these long takes, what happens is it becomes kind of rigid, and it loses that crackle.
That must be demoralizing when you're 2/3 into a take and somehow I
would just stop.
Yeah.
Depending on when. Sometimes you just had to get through it, because even if you were the performance is not we are never going to use this take, but sometimes in my head, I would be like, we should just finish it so the camera people, everyone gets a sense of what the second half of the take is like. And I would say other things all the time. So like, I was also like, you know, by example showing like, I'm not going to say the same shit every time. Like if I think of something funnier, I'm going to do something funnier. Like I'm going to try to keep it loose and try to wobble it a little bit always, because I don't want it to just get stuck in this rhythm, you know what I mean?
Is the moment when you and Ike are talking about therapy, is there some improv in that shit? When you guys are talking about the voice notes in therapy?
Yeah. There's some, I mean, like almost every scene.
I didn't know it was exclusive. Fuck you. That's my shit.
Yeah, there was like, and me, the less, again, always the less people there are, the easier it is to do that kind of thing. So like the 2-person scenes are always a little bit easier to add like looseness to.
How the fuck do you not crack up laughing when Ike or Catherine are on one? I mean,
I would laugh all the time. Like I'm bad at it. I'm honestly, because I'm always like, especially when I'm directing as well, like I'm observing the scene as well as being in the scene. And so in a way that I don't like, when something very funny happens, like the director part of my brain starts to just get excited and like enjoy it, and often will ruin it because I just am like, oh, that was great, you know? And so I think in a good way, I probably ruin more takes than anybody, which also I think reduces the pressure of ruining the take. And I genuinely would not get mad at people for ruining the takes. Like there was a few moments where I had to tell people, please, like if you're gonna go off, or if you're gonna do this thing, like just say this one, like any like, because it's like so tight that like any like a few extraneous words like derail the whole rhythm of the whole scene. And so there were times I would be like, if you're gonna say it, just say these exact words.
That's a light touch though.
Yeah,
I mean, that sounds like you were giving everybody a lot of freedom and space to do what they're doing, and that's why it comes across so funny, is because it is literally like you are on the ride with the characters.
Yeah, and we wanted it to be this. We wanted to feel kind of unhinged and unwieldy and experiential in a very kind of like almost like reckless way. But in order to do that, like it was one of the most technically specific things we've ever like ventured to attempt. And that to us was also like a really fun challenge. Like it was really fun because, to what you're saying, like all the first movies we did also were like 2 cameras, and we were like, what if it was a real exercise in like completely reimagining our process.
But with all the experience of what you know you're capable of in the process.
I actually think if I wasn't the actor and director and one of the writers and the producer, it would have been impossible. Which we also like the idea of, is that like we are doing something that is so specific to what we are doing. And the fact that I'm in the scene and could manipulate the timing, and if I saw it was going too fast, I could slow down. And if I thought it was going too slow, I could speed up. And from within the scene, I could adjust the rhythms, and I knew where the camera was, so I could see like, oh, the camera's going to get to the thing before we get there, so I should slow down a little bit, you know, and all that, or this person's talking too long, I should interrupt them, and that will cue the camera person to pan back to me, you know. Like it would have been so much harder to do if my role in the show wasn't what it was. And so that was also exciting to us.
But it's also so hard to do. So it's like,
it was fun to do.
It's fun, but I mean, let's just
it was challenging. In a fun and engaging way though. Like it was, to me, it's harder to do something that you don't feel excited about.
Right.
I didn't want my own desire to shoot the show this way to be to the detriment of the tone of the show. And I could intellectually
the indulgence we talked about at the very beginning.
And I could intellectually justify how this style was ultimately serving the tone of the show. I could say to myself and say to the people working on the show, we're shooting with 1 camera. It's experiential. It's more stressful. It's unrelenting. It's tonally will keep things as exciting and engaging and kind of anxiety inducing as we want it to. And I would say those words, but at the back of my head, I was always afraid, like, am I just doing this because I want to? Like, am I just doing it because I think it's cool? I think it'll be fun. And what I learned is those 2 things, not always, but in this instance could coexist.
Could be true.
Yes. But that was the fear but it was a fear, but also something it's funny, like I do pottery, you know, and for that, it's like a very just like a hobby for the most part. And at first I would try to make everything. And then I started to realize, like, you know, these things are very nice and I'm good at making them, but I don't actually enjoy making them as I enjoy making some other things. And that was something I thought with this was like, what if we also make it in a way that process-wise speaks to how I want to be spending my time? And we've just been doing this for 25 years.
Yeah.
We've been pointing two cameras at actors and telling them to improvise. Since I was 16 years old, I've been doing that.
Yeah.
And so we thought, just what if it was different? What if we spent and what if we spent our days doing it in a way that felt so much more exciting? And there's never an insert shot, and there's never an establishing shot. It's always the scene. And I, as an actor, don't like shooting those scenes where I'm like walking in a room and sitting down and turning on the light and it's just like part of a little montage or something like that.
Enough.
It's just not fun for me. Like, I want to do scenes. Like, I want to do actual real scenes with conflict and turns and twists and choices and jokes and a progression and unexpected things arising and tension and stakes, like that's what I want to be like playing in a day-to-day basis. And so we really wrote the show to be like that, and then shot the show in a way where you never were like sitting on an apple box off camera. Like you're never off camera. Every scene you're on camera.
So with that in mind, let me ask you this: Has it stirred anything in you to want to go back on the stage? To want to go back where it really is?
No.
Yeah, I kind of knew that'd be the answer, but it felt like a decent question.
Not at all. And that's just a world I don't know or understand that well. You know what I mean? Like I fully feel like I understand like filmed comedy and live comedy is a thing that I don't understand as much, I don't quite. I look at other people and they're amazing at it, and I think like I couldn't do that necessarily. You know what I mean?
You have had so many incredible experiences that all culminate in this show. All the things you talked about, the way that you're maneuvering as a director and a writer and a producer and as an actor and as an ensemble cast member and all of these things that are kind of moving at the same time. And you think about your life and how all these kind of skills sort of develop over the course of your career. It's not like you were like, hey, one day I'm going to do all of it.
No, not at all.
It just ends up landing that way. But along the way, you've had some people who saw in you things and obviously recognize that. And Judd's got to feel like, all right, I was right on. Like that kid that I met, that I met early on, who really I just brought in because he's a great writer and maybe there was something he could do on screen.
Yeah.
But look how far he's come. And I think that's one of the great things when you get to watch the people you really believe in kind of grow with you and ultimately become your peer.
Oh, for sure.
And sort of that must be a really nice thing for your friendship to realize that like the bet for both of you has paid off.
Oh yeah, it's so nice, and he was one of the first people we sent the show to, and him liking it was like hugely meaningful, because Judd worked on the Larry Sanders Show, like it was, wow. and when I first moved to LA, like Gary was sort of like the kind of patriarchal figure of like the group I fell in because Judd had worked on Larry Sanders Show and knew him. And so, like to me and Evan, that show was sort of like our like beacon. And when we were young, we were obsessed with it. And then I got to move to LA and work with Judd, and that he saw something in me, that he was in the same group of these people that, were the people who like made us want to do comedy in the first place in a lot of ways. And then that he believed in us so much. And then that we specifically have made a show that really is trying to kind of capture the magic that we found in that show. It feels very full circle and
it must be nice for him as well to watch that and be like, oh man, that spirit that we had with Chandling is kind of alive.
I hope so. Yeah. I hope he feels that way.
What was Gary Chandling like as a person anytime you got to spend with him?
Oh, he was just like the funniest and the best, and like was so kind of, he would come to our table reads and just be so like generous and instructive and was so like happy to sit around a table of writers who like had been doing it for 2 years, and he was just like seemed to really enjoy being a part of the process, and he would kind of instill his wisdom, but he also didn't act like he knew everything and was excited by new ideas and new people, and I was like 17. I look back and I'm like, these people were so much nicer to me than I probably would be to myself. Like I was 17, 18 years old, and they
great role models though,
they
right?
would let me write jokes for them. They would allow me to, I think Gary hosted the Emmys in 2000 or 2001, and they would let me come to the pre-taped bits, and I would pitch jokes, and I would be on set, and I would just see how they worked, and it was like, it was like, it was so kind of them, especially because I was like a child, to invite me into these like very adult work environments.
Isn't it great when the adults don't let you down?
Yeah, it's so nice. It's very nice. And I've been very generous or lucky, I think, in having a lot of generous adults, very kind adults around me.
Well, I'm sure generous as well. I mean, good people pay it forward, right, at the end of the day. And that must be like the spirit of how you move that you've kept in terms of how the kind of set you want to create and the experience you want to create, and also the breaks you want to provide people as they come in. Do you have moments like that where you realize the table has turned now in the most positive way, where I am Judd and I am seeing young talent come through, and I believe in people like this?
For sure. And again, that was part of the inspiration for the show, was like, I've become one of the people who in some ways can decide what to support and what not to support. And yeah, I mean, and I feel guilt and joy over those decisions. But yeah, and we try to do it. We try with the show to cast people who, like a combination of people who are kind of people I just think are funny and are, improvisational comedians I've worked with, or people who, I've just seen. And, the Golden Globes episode, there's a very funny guy named Dan Black, who I had just done some comedy shows with, a woman named Lisa Gilroy, who's incredibly funny, who I'd done a few improv shows with. And for wherever there was an opportunity to populate the show with people who weren't like big name celebrities, I would look for people just like, the pediatric oncologist episode, which is coming, which is one of my favorite episodes.
You got this pitch thing down, man. You just got to say 2 words and I'm laughing.
I'm dating, the whole joke is I'm dating a pediatric oncologist, and I go to a medical gala and find myself like a fish out of water in the world of doctors, basically. And yeah, there's Rebecca Hall is the pediatric oncologist, but the other people.
What a great casting that is.
Oh, she's so good and so funny. And but yeah, there's people like a guy Derek Wilson and a woman named Sugar Lynn Beard, who are just like actors I'm big fans of that I think are really funny, and I try to put them in things that let other people see they're funny.
I've had a really, really good time getting to know you, and through the filter of this. And thank you for being so forthcoming and answering my questions. And I've had a really good time hanging out, man. I can't wait to see all the episodes of the series as it unfolds. And I genuinely, and I can't speak on behalf of the company, this is where it gets awkward, but I can say as a fan of the show, I'm looking forward to all the seasons to come in the future.
Thank you. I'm feeling good about it.
Good, you should. It's a smash. It's great to see you, Seth.
Great to see you. This was so fun.
Thanks, man.